So when I prepare my high holiday sermons, I come up first and foremost with themes about which I want to speak. And then what I do is I allocate each theme to a different service depending on who I think is going to be there. What we've grown to understand over the past many years is Rosh Hashanah, first day, has its largest crowd. And then we dwindle just a bit for the second day of Rosh Hashanah. It shows us that there are people who want to be here for 2 days, and then there are some who can't because of whatever life's requirements are. And therefore they can't be here a second day for Rosh Hashanah. We find that Kol Nidre has a pretty large appeal, mostly because of the melodies that are so powerful. And you can almost hear, whenever I say the words Kol Nidre, you can hear that Sinaitic melody. And then Yom Kippur Day has its ebbs and flows, because it is a full day of davening. People come and stay and go and come and stay and go. And so when I prepared my variety of themes, this one was created specifically for you, and for those who are watching at home as well. Ma, you want to come in and sit down? Ma, it's a long sermon. You might want to sit down. Now I know I stretched it out long enough. This past spring and this past summer, I did 3 activities that required me to interact with people. Actually, it was new people that was most important. You see, all of you I've come to grow and know. And so the interactions that I have with you are genuine over time that grows with friendship. But I rarely come into contact with people outside of this congregation. For the most part, everything that I do every day of the week involves people in this community. But this past spring and summer, I did 3 things that brought me into contact with people who were new to me. And they turned out to be experiences that, quite honestly, changed my view on what it means to be part of a larger community. And it taught me a tremendous amount about what it means to feel like an insider and what it feels like to be an outsider. This past May, I traveled to Israel with Jewish and non-Jewish clergy. During the summer, I served as a juror in a criminal case. And then the most significant, because those really weren't significant experiences, I played softball on a new team. I hadn't played softball in years. And I learned a tremendous amount about myself when I find myself in a new circumstance in which the people are people I don't know, with whom I'm required to interact on a regular basis. Clergy, both Jewish and non, bring to the world a unique perspective, and from them I learned so much, but quite honestly, I felt somewhat insecure. We have colleagues here in the river towns and throughout Westchester, both Jewish and non-Jewish clergy, who are extraordinarily talented and incredibly wise. And so I was somewhat intimidated to be on that trip. And the experience of serving as a juror, in which a swath of American life is brought together symbolized by 12 people, none of whom I'd known. And the weight of the decisions that we were required to make over the course of that 2-week period still haunt me till this day. And I did everything that I had in my tool belt to become part of those groups. So let me tell you a little bit about the softball team just for a moment. Because it's the ball field, it's the playground, in which I use those tools from my childhood that I felt were best apt to make me become part of the inside group. So I used my incredible sense of humor and my wonderful humility. And needless to say, I'm still too old to be playing softball. But I was probably just trying to recapture my youth. I knew I was going to have to miss the first couple of games and practices because the league started before the school year ended, but I signed up anyways. So on top of the fact that I didn't know anyone, I was late to the game. But I noticed 3 things about the roster and the people I played with on this softball team. Number 1, their names didn't sound Jewish. Number 2, there were a lot of them, so they wouldn't miss me if I was gone for a game or so. And of course, number 3, I didn't know a single person. It was like my first day in public high school all over again, the new kid. Like those days, I set out to fit in, learning the language. You know, there's a vocabulary and a set of topics that are discussed. The group was basically all young fathers, so the conversation centered on family obligations, sports practices that they had to drive their children to, day camps, and the jokes that come with all of those activities. It was a nice group of guys. No vulgarity. They weren't the type that spoke of things that were inappropriate. They were all family men. And that I could relate to. I might not be able to identify specifically with their concerns, but in time I learned to speak their language. All of the time trying to say something that wouldn't embarrass myself. At first, I steered clear of my job and my age. I was tangentially interested in their lives, so I listened in on their conversations while we threw the ball around, and while I prayed I wouldn't drop a ball. Then came picking up sides for the scrimmage. Oh. We were there for practice so that we could get ready for the season. Thankfully, we lined up and counted off. It was much better than the demoralizing choosing teams. As we made our way to the field, I ran to right field. No one ever hits to right field. And I could watch and I could see the level of play and gauge where I might fit in. The operative word for all of us in almost everything we do in life is the desire to fit in. So many of us just want to fit in. Some reject the idea either because they're confident or because they're fearful. The idea of fitting in. Confident that there's no question they're going to fit in immediately, or fearful that there is no way they'll ever fit in. Many want to belong. That's to feel as though we belong. And that's why we say when we're asked, which synagogue do you attend? The answer always comes in the form of, I belong to GHC. We speak sometimes about dues. But more often than not, we speak about belonging. And that is something far deeper, far more significant than the line from Cheers of going to a place where everyone knows your name. Belonging is more significant. We long for more. We want more. We need more. We want a place that confirms our values and supports them. We want a place of celebration and comfort. And many of us don't even know what we want, but we show up nonetheless. You may have heard the phrase, when someone loses a loved one and you pay a shiva call, you say the phrase, Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch sha'ar avelei Tzion b'Yerushalayim. May you be comforted amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. But the key word there is hamakom. Hamakom yinachem etchem. The word hamakom here has a double meaning. One, it means the place. The place. That is a name for God. May God comfort you amongst the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. But hamakom also in this location means the place, the actual space. We pray that we find ourselves in the presence of the Almighty, but we also hope and pray that we find ourselves in a place, in a space of safety and security, surrounded by the people that we find there. Sitting alone just doesn't work. Even if it's our instinct to hide, that can't be the totality of our experience as human beings. Our synagogue experience will be the place where we experience the most challenging moments and also the most comforting. Like children who hated Hebrew school, never to return after their bar mitzvah, sometimes this place challenges us. Sometimes it makes us feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it asks of us more than we're prepared to give. Hillel, one of the great sages, once said, Al tifrosh minat zibur. Don't separate yourself from the community. He needs to say that because sometimes that's our instinct. We're tired of the emails. We're tired of the requests. We're tired of the responsibilities. But as I often like to say, membership has its privileges. Community has its responsibilities. Hillel says, Al tifrosh minat zibur. Sometimes the easiest thing to do in life is to step away, to walk away, to say, I've had enough. I'm beaten down. I'm exhausted. I'm not going to shul anymore. Hillel said, don't separate yourself from the community, but he said so much more. He said, don't trust yourself until the day of your death. And don't judge your fellow person until you've reached his or her place. Hillel teaches a basic principle and then tells us why he needs to teach that in the first place. He believes that the two main reasons why a person leaves or never joins a community in the first place is because A, he or she thinks he can go it alone. How many of us believe we can do it alone? We're self-sufficient, strong, independent. And second, he says, because we feel judged by others. How many of us, don't raise your hand, but ask yourself the question, how many of us feel when we walk into this room, we don't have adequate knowledge, we don't have a strong enough Jewish background, maybe we don't read Hebrew as well as the person next to us, maybe people are going to judge us based on what we're wearing, and so we drop out. We don't feel, some of us, that we make enough of a contribution. We feel sometimes that no one cares about us. We feel sometimes that people are looking down on us. Those are the two challenges, says Hillel, for community. He can make the statement, don't separate yourself from community, but know that those who do, they do so for a good reason. They either think they can do it themselves, as Terence Real once argued, that we have in America created a toxic culture of individualism, that we think it's all about the individual. And second, we feel judged. I tell you, as a person who is engaged in this issue every day of the week, almost every hour of my waking day, we give people a lot of excuses to leave, to drop out. Drawing inspiration from the Al-Khait prayer, offer this following prayer. We judge sometimes overtly and sometimes unconsciously. We must do better. We exclude unintentionally. We forget to acknowledge someone who has done something wonderful, and sometimes we don't follow up on someone who is missing. And for those reasons and many more, sometimes we just think we should at least go it alone. Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Palestine at the time, considered one of the fathers of religious Zionism, offered this following prayer. There is a person who sings the songs of the nation. He steps forward from his private self, which he finds narrow and insufficiently developed. He yearns for the heights. He clings with a sensitive love to the entirety of the Jewish nation and sings with it its song. He shares in its painful moments, its joyful hopes, speaks with exalted and pure thoughts regarding the past and its future, investigates the inner spiritual nature with love and a wise heart. Oh, I wish that could be each and every one of us, that we step outside of our private selves and enter the Jewish community. And he continues, there is a person whose soul is so broad that it expands beyond the borders of the people of Israel. He longs for a day when we can see outside ourselves to a greater world. He sings the songs of humanity. This soul constantly grows broader with the exalted totality of humanity and its glorious image. Entering community, says Abraham Isaac Kook, means entering the world and leaving the toxic individualism behind. He continues, he yearns for humanity's general enlightenment. He looks forward to its supernal perfection. From this source of life, he draws all of his thoughts and insights, his ideals and wisdom. We don't grow, says Abraham Isaac Kook, from sitting in our rooms and reading. We grow from interacting with others. And there is a person who rises even higher until he unites with all existence, with all creatures, and with all worlds. And with all of them, he sings. This is the person who, engaged in the chapter of song every day, is assured that he is a child of the world to come. Being part of community allows us to be part of history. Being part of community means we strengthen the link from one generation to another. And there is a person who rises with all of these songs together in one ensemble, so that they all give forth their voices, they all sing their songs sweetly. Each supplies its fellow with fullness and life. We give each other life by being together. The voice of happiness and joy, the voice of rejoicing and tunefulness, the voice of merriment, and the voice of holiness. We are a Kahal Kadosh. We are a holy nation. The song of the soul, the song of the nation, the song of humanity, the song of the world, they all mix together with every person in every moment, in all times, when we come together. We come together not only because of what we get, but also because of what we give. We feel supported, and we're capable of giving support. We feel valued, and then we're able to offer others a sense of value. We feel we belong, and because we feel we belong, we can invite others to feel belong. There can be, in our community, no sense of insiders and outsiders. The Jewish people leave Egypt. And along with the Jewish people who left Egypt came a people referred to in the text as the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes. There were a people who, alongside the Jews, left Egypt. They saw this as their opportunity for freedom as well. They sought to become part of something bigger, greater, the Jewish community. And the Jews who left Egypt simply absorbed them. It's a great moment for the Jewish people to be able to absorb others into our midst, to break down those boundaries and allow others to find themselves comfortable here on our bima and in our community. The flip side of the coin is horrible. During the Holocaust, we know 6 million Jews died, but there were 7 million others who died as well, right alongside us. When the Jewish people left Russia, when the Iron Curtain came down, there were so many others who were suffering alongside the Jewish people, and they left as well. And the Jewish state, Israel, had a significant challenge. And they asked themselves, who is a Jew? And found a way to absorb all of those immigrants. From the beginning of the concept of nationhood, there were those who were in, and there were those who were out. There were those who belonged, and then there were those who simply connected with those. In time, those people who identified with the Jewish people became part of us, and we are better for it. When we left Egypt, I assumed there were big conversations and huge debates about whether or not we should let the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes, in. Maybe we should find some way to bound ourselves better. But in time, the debate dissolved, and the boundary between us and them dissolved, and we became stronger because of it. When Israel was founded from the ashes of the Holocaust and the fledgling state of Israel grew in massive numbers, with each consecutive aliyah, with each consecutive emigration to Israel, Israel became stronger for it. And I say it's time now for radical acceptance. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting we should go out and start knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, you want to be Jewish? I'm only suggesting that there are people who want to be a part of us, who want to marry us, who want to be a part of our community, who want to be Jewish, who want to raise children who are Jewish. And we have to help them to be a part of our community. Zane Diamond, a beautiful soul who struggled with their place in the Jewish community because of an age-old misguided and misunderstanding of what the trans community was all about, said, "To be Jewish has taught me that the only constant is change, and that revision and creation are two sides of the same coin. Our challenge is not to react, redesign, reframe, regenerate who we are as a community, our challenge is to be accepting. And I invite you to do that with me. As much as this coming year will be about renovating our building, it also has to be about the hard work of cheshbon hanefesh, of searching our souls, about figuring out how each and every one of us is going to make a contribution. Membership has its privileges. Community has its responsibility. In Herman Wouk's novel, Inside Outside, the main character, a guy named Israel David Goodkind, narrates the events of his life in a variety of times and places in which he felt sometimes like an insider and sometimes like an outsider. As a child among adults, as a son of immigrants in a world of Native Americans, as a Jew in a non-Jewish world, as an intellectual in a world of sports, as a freshman in a world dominated by juniors and seniors and so on, you can see each and every one of us at some point in our life, just like Israel David Goodkind, feels like an insider and an outsider, depending on the circumstances in which we find ourselves. He struggled with wanting to be on the inside. He wanted to belong. And in one brief moment, he speaks of that longing to belong. I was overwhelmed with yearning for, desperate affection for this outsider in the green hat and stocking feet. He had fallen in love with someone who was not part of the Jewish community, and he wanted her to be accepted in the Jewish community. He wanted his family to accept her. We want to be accepted. We want to belong. We want to be with people who are like us, and we want to be with people who are different. We want to be with people who challenge us, and we want to be with people who unconditionally love us. The Torah has spoken of the ger, the yatom, the almanah, the stranger, the widow, the orphan, and our requirement to care for them. How many of us feel like strangers? And what can we do to alter that perception? I ask that sincerely. How many of us feel like we were the last ones picked for the team? And I ask sincerely, what can we do to change that? I think that one of the ways is simple, and that is to change the way we speak. Be careful of the language we assume others understand. We have to change our vocabulary just a little bit. When I say shul, do you know how many people have no idea what I mean? I mean our synagogue. I mean our home. I mean our building, and I mean our people. Invite someone to your house. Invite them to come to a program or a class with you. Ask someone new to help with an initiative, or just ask someone new to sit next to you. Ask someone to help. Introduce yourself and be curious about them. Recognize that what we do in everyday speech and action gives off the vibe of us and them, and then make a subtle change to your intention and your awareness. We have a special mission and purpose as GHC in the river towns. We have been called by God and our people for a reason. And it will take all of us sitting here today, watching at home, to realize the vision of stepping boldly into the next stage of our people on this planet. We have arrived at 75 years. It's significant, but there is more to come. We have to step boldly. And I ask you, sincerely, deeply, genuinely, to take my hand and walk alongside us as we step forward. We know there is so much more work to do. But because we are in community, we are in relationship. And so I pray for the sins that we have committed against you under duress and willingly, and for the sin we have committed against you by hard-heartedness, for the sin we have committed against you inadvertently, for the sin we have committed against you with the utterance of the lips, for the sin we have committed against you openly and secretly, for the sin we have committed against you through speech, for the sin we have committed against you by gathering and not noticing you weren't there, for the sin we've committed against you by saying things that are insensitive, for the sin we have committed against you by being disrespectful, for the sin we have committed against you intentionally and unintentionally, for the sin we have committed against you by pushing you outside of your comfort zone, for the sin we have committed against you by not being supportive and not being as supportive as we should have been, and for the sin we have committed against you for making light of what is important to you, and for the sin we have committed before you knowingly or unknowingly. For all of these, God, please pardon us. Pardon us, forgive us, atone for us, and I beg every one of you to please keep coming back. Shana Tova.